reality is, most members of Congress actually like each other. Republicans, Democrats, we actually do. It doesn't come across that way, but we do like each other. Let me give you a story. I was on MSNBC, a program on MSNBC. It's called the Martin Bashir Show. It's on at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Martin Bashir is a self-identified liberal. He called my office, asked me if I would go on the show, and he said absolutely. So I go on the show, and we've talked about different policy issues. We had an engaging back and forth, respectful, I thought, on both sides. I went back a second time. Same thing. I went back a third time. At the end of the third interview, this is over a span of maybe 6-8 weeks. This was because I was on the budget committee, and we were discussing budget issues. At the end of the third interview, he closed the interview by saying, "Wow, Frank Guinta, a reasonable Republican." And I was never invited back on the show. So my communications director, this is true, my communications director would call the producer of the show and say, "Hey, Frank would like to come on. He enjoys being with Martin." The producer finally admitted to him, "Martin likes Frank, but that's not the kind of show we want." Now, I'm not picking on MSNBC. Just choose any of the cable shows. This is what happens. They want a liberal and a conservative on the show and let them have at it, because guess what? The ratings are going through the roof. And it's getting us riled up. They're making a lot of money, and we get more and more frustrated. We tend to see right now what happens in Washington through the lens of whatever media outlet we look at. So what I would say to you is, if you're going to watch cable news, take it for what it's worth. It's more entertainment than news. Now, why am I optimistic that we can get something done? Let me give you a couple of scenarios. One scenario is that President Obama wins re-election. The House stays Republican and the Senate stays Democrat. After spending $2 billion, nothing changes. That's one scenario. I have to believe that the legacy of this president and the people that were re-elected has to be about moving the country forward. That they cannot come back to their constituents and say there was another 2 to 4 years of gridlock. We've already experienced that for the first 2 years that I've been in, and to a large extent, 4 years that the president's been in. The country is very frustrated with that. And at some point, the people who are in Washington, I think, do want to come back home and say, well, my legacy is X. And that there was a favorable legacy on my presidency, or on my term in the House, or my term in the Senate. But secondly, and I hope more importantly, regardless of the outcome of the election, decent Americans, Republican and Democrats, will get elected around the country. And there will be people on the House side and the Senate side that rise above it and say, this is a time to think about America first. And what are the rational, common sense provisions of reform can we find?